morning, everyone. All right, looks like we got everybody rolling in, so let's go ahead and get started. First, thank you for joining me this morning. My name is Mark Hummel. I am our Director of Sales and Strategy for all things automation and AI here at Bullhorn. If you're unfamiliar with Bullhorn, we have the opportunity to partner with over 10,000 firms within the staffing and recruiting industry. We provide industry-leading software, everything from applicant tracking system through to some of the automation products that we'll talk about today. But as we look at the session title here, I wanted to jump into this VMS Process Remastered. And the reason that we went this route is much like the rest of the industry and the rest of the dynamic for our industry. There's been a lot of change in the way that we've seen VMS requisitions work. But really, much like the rest of the industry, it's less about the jobs themselves and more about how we actually find, nurture, and deliver these jobs to the right candidates. And so that's really what we're going to talk about this morning is, yes, this process can be even more streamlined and automated within the VMS framework, but a lot of what we'll talk about today works very well for clients within our retail business as well. But if we look first at, again, why this is such an opportunity for us within VMS specifically, you'll see that over the last few years, so since 2009, VMS usage has exploded by enterprise buyers. So as staffing firms, our clients have seen, a client that's 1,000 full-time hires and larger has seen anywhere from the 50% usage of VMS in 2009 to now a whopping 81% of these type of contingent buyers are using VMS technology. So delivering these requisitions through an MSP in most cases to all of us as staffing suppliers. And the spend over the last 3 years has been amazing growth. We looked at a couple different industries here, so light industrial, tech, and financial. We took some of the data points that we have across 3 companies in each of these areas and kind of averaged them out, so you could see this trajectory from 2019, to 2021. In light industrial, where we've seen quite a bit more adoption of medium-sized and low-size large firms actually using VMS technologies where they hadn't before. The ones that had been using it for quite a while have seen pretty decent growth. I think we all know that what happened here in the first half of 2020, why these numbers dipped quite significantly. But if we look at the comparison for the second half of 2021 against the first half of 2019, we've actually seen a 15% growth despite that dip in the middle. And that's, again, more digitization coming from our clients, wanting to put more jobs on these platforms, then pushing more jobs out to us as suppliers in an automated fashion. And the tech and financial industries has had an amazing boom of their spend going through VMS platforms. Again, you can see in 2019, the first half, still amazing spend over $200 million in contracts going through a VMS system across the average of these 3 clients that we studied. But when we look at the second half of 2021, there is a 43% growth because we are hovering right around $360 million going through these platforms for these tech and financial companies. So what that tells us, obviously, is that VMS, I don't think anybody who's been doing this for a while thinks VMS is going anywhere, but we're seeing more digitization, more push through these platforms so that enterprise buyers can keep track of their spend, can keep track of their historical position counts, and start to do some trend analysis as well with the MSPs. So a strategy to grab all this growth and double down on it is very important. But there's also been some more shifts that we've seen thanks to all of this shakeup in the market. One of the biggest ones for us, I think, when we look at the VMS landscape specifically and these large enterprise buyers, what most of us consider strategic customers to our business, is that they've always had these national positions, but now most of our large clients are telling us that more than 50% of their VMS opportunities are remote opportunities. So as a remote opportunity, we've got some real cool implications to this. Now with more positions being remote, we can start to leverage a national job pool, way of working these requisitions, but probably most excitingly, a national talent pool. So as we've typically seen, obviously we have clients or candidates, that have a specific location that they want to be in, and that had really before limited their placement opportunities, their redeployment opportunities. But now with so many positions being remote, we've got this amazing opportunity to leverage a national talent pool. And we're seeing that kind of trickle into a new multi-market office strategy. So a lot of our clients who have, 50, 60, or 5 or 10 offices across the country are having to really think about how they're going to market, how they're positioning candidates, candidate ownership, et cetera, when they think about this national talent pool. Because we want to stop looking at these pieces of business in silos, because really the market's not looking at them in silos anymore either. How do we take the economies of scale approach? And we have a good barometer for how this works successfully. Some of you might have seen the session yesterday with Larry from Insight Global and Amy from CHG, some great partners of ours here at Bullhorn. They talked a lot about that healthcare playbook. Healthcare has had this for a while, especially if we look at travel nursing, 13-week contracts. There's constant movement, constant redeployment, and a national talent pool of candidates, a national pool of jobs. And so they've had to look at this as non-siloed approach for how they address, making those fills within their VMS programs. But I think the one other piece that's interesting when we look at healthcare is healthcare has always had has for the most part always had a candidate first mentality, because everybody has access to all of the jobs. If you're certified and you have decent national level relationships, you have most of the same jobs as your national competitor in staffing. Before, that hadn't always been the case in our light industrial and tech and finance roles, but we're starting to see that be more the case today. As we look across the several hundred different firms that we automate their VMS positions through, we're starting to see more duplication of roles across our clients than ever before, telling us that the opportunities that you have in your pipe are often the same opportunities that your competitor has in theirs. And the question is really, how can you fulfill them quickest with the best candidate and the most sticky candidate to give them the best experience? And so that's a big piece of what we're going to chat about, because while the VMS jobs have certainly changed and the market has boomed much to all of our wallets appreciation, we're starting to really see a change in how we match and that other side of the equation. And that's the candidate. So when we did this survey, you might be familiar with the Bullhorn Grid survey. It goes out every year. We got over 4,000 global staffing professionals and asked them our favorite question: rank your top priorities and top challenges for the year ahead. And if you have seen these surveys in the past, you've seen that typically the top priority is actually winning clients, winning business, winning job requisitions. That has always been at the top year after year as we've done these surveys. But now if you see, that has shifted down to number 5, and candidate acquisition sits atop number 1. And I would say followed not so closely, but followed by digital transformation and candidate experience, which is we're going to talk about here in a second, we really see as all one and the same pursuit. So a huge shift. We now all know that the jobs are coming in. We walk on site with a client and they've got a backlog of jobs that other staffing firms may be having trouble filling, and they're giving us requisitions. That's awesome. Do we have the talent pool that is ready to quickly and on demand meet those requisitions? Because we look at the top challenges, obviously, talent shortage sits at the very top. Certainly reskilling, as people look to figure out how they can get people that they have great relationships with who are maybe more entry level into this next phase of their career. But everybody is looking at how do they find the people to fill the roles, because the opportunity seems almost limitless. But generations and how we work with them have certainly changed. And Many of you probably have this feeling as you start looking across the candidates that you're recruiting. We're starting to see certainly Generation X, where we've typically had those relationships with hiring managers, is starting to get a lot more Generation Y. So we're starting to see that 21 to 40-year-old generation take over into management roles and start to have much of the hiring capability that obviously is controlling what gets us placements at these customers. And they want to be interacted with differently as well. So not only do they certainly have somewhat different motivations, a little bit less on maybe the teamwork and win as a team, more on the responsibility, personal work experiences, competitive, goal-oriented, but from a more singular approach. And that gets extrapolated even more as we look into Gen Z. They're looking for creativity, for individuality, and they're really driven by, again, those singular on-demand experiences. I think that's the biggest thing. If we look towards the bottom of this chart and we look at what type of marketing, what type of leadership style, we look at Gen Z, we're looking for empowering and inspiring. We're looking for digital and real-time on demand for marketing. And the reason those are such an interesting correlation is obviously empowering means self-service as soon as we think about that. The opportunity for a Gen Z person to really be self-service, not maybe in their job search, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but in everything beyond that. They want the recruiter touch, but they want to be able to use the recruiter when they need the recruiter and be able to self-service when they want to self-service. And certainly Generation Alpha is going to be the extreme piece for that, where we'll see probably even more craving of self-service. Fidget spinner is probably a pretty relatable, iconic toy for them with the attention span. So what does all that mean as far as, let's put some numbers behind this and give you guys some insight into what the candidate is saying. So that same survey that we talked about, 4,000 clients that we interviewed about what are their challenges, what are they thinking about the market this year, did the same thing for the first time this year on the talent side. And the talent had some really interesting things to say about working with recruiters and that recruiter experience. So first off, 66% have a very favorable opinion of working with recruiters, and 70% say that they want human interactions during the job search process. That tells us they absolutely want to work with recruiters, see the value of working with recruiters, and that's here to stay. So this is by no means the new generation doesn't need the human interaction. That is still very much here. But they're craving a better way of getting that human interaction. So one of the pieces, 50% have said that they've given up on a job search because the processes took too long. We've got some other research as well that says that there's a heavy burden on the amount of inefficiency that they've experienced, the back and forth that they've experienced with recruiters. Again, just wanting to have the information when they want the information and be able to do with it what they need to do with it. 93% of workers say that these online talent platforms that we've all heard of, the Fivers and the Upworks, actually offer a way more streamlined, better platform experience. That being said, they would still rather work with a recruiter. So they're craving some of those pieces, that digital experience, but they still want the human interaction. It's just more that they want it on demand when they want it. And a lot of these pieces, again, we'll talk a little bit deeper about this as we get into kind of the flow and how some of this has changed for our larger clients. But a lot of this is they want that interaction up front, that relationship build, that nurturing through a job search. And they really want to be able to self-service deeper and deeper into the process. And so when we say that their expectations have shifted, again, 90% say that they want it during the job search itself. 93% are still looking at that online platform of the ratings for the employer, the visibility into where they're at in the job process, as well as the visibility into how their profile stacks up against their competition. So all of these pieces seem to give us a really interesting look at what that digital experience could look like. And certainly, I think most of us have felt this as we've seen this change, certainly over the years. that job comes out. How do I reach out to them? We all have our best methods for whether I'm going to reach out via email, I'm going to search on people for LinkedIn and send LinkedIn messages. I'm going to reach out via the phone. This stat tells us that there is no one size fits all. There is no one right answer for that first reach out to a candidate. The fact that we see 38% want that first reach out to be email actually somewhat tells us that they want some anonymity and some availability to maybe not to ignore that request. So again, the true omni-channel approach is going to be what wins this process. And that kind of has led us to our initial thought on this is, and you might have seen some of you who attended Bullhorn Engage or some of the other conferences that we've attended. This has been very much our talking point in the last few of these, but I'm going to give a little bit of a twist into what we've learned on this. So we've always said, and Larry said it really well yesterday on his session, that Upwork and Fiverr are really racing to become more traditional staffing firms because they have that great platform already. And all they need to do is figure out a way to give the personal touch and all the service pieces that we have as staffing firms. And then, of course, become employer of record and all the technical back office stuff as well. And that staffing firms are racing to see if they can transform themselves digitally so that they don't get their business taken away by the Upworks and Fivers. That had always been kind of how we looked at that race to the middle, as we called it. But now what we're seeing is it's not so much about the Upworks and the Fivers being our immediate threat and immediate competition. It is that recruiters still very much want to work with staffing firms and want to work with recruiters. So it's more about how do we race to the middle against our own competitors in the market. So staffing firms at an increasing clip are bringing in outside perspectives on digital transformation, on candidate experience, and we're starting to see a lot of polling and interaction with candidates to understand better how they want to interact with the firms. And so now we're seeing this race to the middle actually between staffing firms and staffing firms of everybody trying to figure out how they're digitizing quickly enough to make their experience permeate to more and more candidates and attract more candidates into this pool and engage with them and retain them. So when you look at your own candidate experience, how does that stack up to what your expectation of a digital experience is today? And I say your expectation of a digital experience because, as I'm sure it's no mystery to everybody on this call, we have digital experiences all around us. Our world has become an on-demand digital experience. You can order groceries, certainly the well overused Uber example, banking, all of these pieces are on demand. We talk to somebody when we want to. When we got to cancel our plane ticket, I probably don't call American Airlines. I probably do it in the app and just reschedule it. So one of my favorite examples, and again, I'll steal this from our friends at Insight Global, is to think about the modern home buying experience. Because a lot of what we talk about in digital experiences today, the easy way to dismiss some of that would be, well, those are small-time decisions, small-time purchases. If I don't get a great experience with a person for my ability to order groceries for $100, I probably just won't use that service again. Well, buying a home would arguably be one of the biggest experiences that we see anybody pursuing, certainly a big expense. And think about that process today. It used to be that your real estate agent would shepherd you through this entire journey. They would be the ones that show you the houses that they think you'd be most interested in seeing. They obviously walk you through the houses and they go all the way through closing. But today, most real estate agents are there for, again, when you need them. You're searching for your own houses on Zillow and Realtor.com. You're sending them to your real estate agent and telling them, I'd like to go see this house, please. They're doing, a great job unlocking the door and maybe giving some additional expertise on this is a great school district or this is a great resale market, et cetera. But you're really using them for that market knowledge more than you're using them for the little odds and end pieces that you used them for in the past. And then certainly, again, we get it into the onboarding process, or in this case, the actual purchase process, you're seeing a lot of automation come into play here with most of these large realtor firms. So they're automating when you need to sign certain documents, automating when you need to accept certain disclosures. All of that process just kind of streams to you, and you pick it up and do with it what you want in an on-demand facility. And so all these different mediums are used. All of this is on demand, and your agent's just kind of there to give the expertise when you want it. And that's really how we see a lot of staffing firms starting to win as they think about this new digitized candidate experience. Because the secret to success that we're seeing in these experiences is obviously they have to be multi-channel engagement. But the big piece to the multi-channel is it's great that you can text and you can email and you can send stuff through an app. You can be there when wherever the candidate wants you to be, but you have to use automation and AI to know where the candidate wants you to be for each of those phases. And then that gives the candidate the ability to self-service. So if we start learning from their behaviors, learning from their preferences of when they want to interact with what forms of medium, and we can serve that up in a self-service fashion, we're seeing a lot of candidates, again, harking back to the online platforms like the Fivers and the Upworks. A lot of candidates appreciate that ability to, on demand, do what they want when they want to. And so this new experience, obviously, we need to build these loyal candidates and workers because those jobs are sitting there waiting to be filled. Who can have the most robust, most engaged candidate pipeline is really the name of the game today. The increased redeployment. This is an interesting one for us because, again, as we study statistics across those of our clients who do track redeployment, even though the number of jobs that have gone remote have increased, and that should then imply that you now have a national talent pool to service those, which means that redeployment should be easier because you should be able to suggest a lot more jobs to each candidate. We still haven't seen a boom in redeployment that matches the boom in remote work. So an opportunity, sits there for us to be able to serve up the right jobs on a national scale before anybody rolls off of their assignment. And certainly reducing operation costs, job board spend. You'll always hear the stats of how many candidates could have been found in your applicant tracking system, but the first step seems to be to go out to the job boards. This process, this digital experience, really makes sure that we utilize what's in our database first, utilize what's in our database every time, so that we can, still go out to the LinkedIns, the Monsters and Career Builders, but in the background, we're using the candidates that we have to the best of our ability. And so what does that process kind of look like? So, we have a product, Bullhorn Connect, but if we think about this just in any digital talent platform, what needs to happen is you need to be able to access every phase of this process and interaction with the candidate in one seamless end-to-end experience. So you need to be able to nurture that talent pool, sure, with multi-channel engagement, things like, sending out great newsletters or industry blogs targeted specifically to the candidate based on what their roles are, their skill sets, et cetera. But you also need to serve up those smart jobs to them. So keeping them consistently engaged to come back and look at the jobs that you have available. In that same interface and that same multi-channel approach, you need to be able to, once you get a candidate really excited about a role, to be able to let them fast and easily apply to that role and engage them throughout the application process with, again, the channels of which they prefer to work with. Same can be said for every additional stage in this, the hiring process, the new hire piece, attracting or keeping your consultants engaged and active. But then I think, again, the biggest piece here, these last two, the end of assignment and the alumni engagement. How do we automatically make sure that everybody in your organization is aware of candidates rolling off of assignment, but also that those candidates are actively being marketed additional opportunities as they, near the end of that assignment? And this entire platform looks and feels like one seamless way to interact with you as the staffing firm. And certainly on all of these pieces, giving them the opportunity to text you and call you is still there, but they have one centralized dashboard to kind of understand where they stand in the process. And we're going to show you what this can look like in our platform today. But if we look at, again, what this architecture needs to be is basically everything that you're doing in your applicant tracking system. So you're looking at the jobs that you recommend, the job search, the managing of your candidates' profiles, all the way through to tracking their time, getting their feedback on positions. All that stuff today probably lives in your applicant tracking system, but the candidate can't access that directly in many cases. And that's where this Connect product that Bullhorn has brought to the market addresses. It gives the candidate the view into the things that you want them to see and interact with about their own profile, about within their applicant tracking system record. So giving you multi-channel communication, but serving up the pieces that they need through automation and AI, and being able to self-service everything from selecting a job, managing, updating their profile, adding a new resume, all the way through to submitting time and getting paid, all in one platform. And so let's take a look at what that actually looks like in a flow for a candidate. How does the candidate's interaction feel? So again, starts with this talent nurturing piece. If we look at a candidate that's in your ATS today and maybe is dormant, we haven't talked to them in 90 days, we haven't placed them in 6 months. However you think of a candidate that needs to be refreshed, let's say, you want to build some automated campaigns around reaching out to them, engaging with them, giving them industry specific content that works for their job, their title, etc. And keeping in mind different ways that they want to be interacted with. All of these different pieces can be kind of automated into a drip campaign. We've heard a lot of our clients say something pretty interesting on this portion of it, especially our larger clients. This has shifted more to the job of the chief marketing officer or someone within the marketing department, because much like HubSpot revolutionized inbound marketing for an entire industry, we're really starting to see staffing and recruiting be more of an inbound marketing industry as well. How do we get the candidates that we already have access to their information being interested in talking to us versus us, chasing them down with phone calls, specifically when we have a role available for them? And so this type of engagement, this nurturing continues through data health as well. So we start getting some engagement from them. We start seeing that they're checking these emails that we're sending out. Now it's time for us to ask them for some pieces of information. Is this still the correct working title? Is this still your resume? Is this still your next available start date? All these pieces can be asked from the candidate or to the candidate in an email and a text, and that information should flow back to your applicant tracking system to update their records automatically. And all of this, again, through text messages too. Let's say that at some point in this process, they're actually open to having a conversation and they want to have a chat with a recruiter, and they text back in this automated process that they'd love to set up a time to talk. The recruiter should be able to seamlessly see the interaction that the candidate's having throughout this journey and step in at any point to give that human touch as well. So again, for example, having this text message be able to be grabbed, assigned to that recruiter, and the recruiter setting up some time for them to chat about those next steps. And that continues into the registration. So we think about, now they've had all this interaction with us as a brand. They've seen that first role that they want to apply themselves for. Amy actually from CHG on yesterday's session had a really good point that it's a very delicate balance of how much information do we ask for and how much information do we save for later, because we want to keep the candidate engaged and get them into our system and start working with us. But we also need all of this data at some point. So we're seeing, that strategy looks something like, let's just grab the first level of information that we need, like name and contact information, as they go and tell us that they're interested for a job. So that can start with just, hey, give us this information. You've now been put into this mobile platform that you're able to look at jobs, get jobs suggested to you, and all you had to do was give us some basic pieces of contact information. And as you start looking through our jobs and you want to apply for some of them, more specifically, then we'll ask you the specific questions on those positions, all in an automated fashion. So again, an example here via email: thanks for your interest in the position, and we're going to, send you out some knockout questions to review, if you'd be a good fit. And then we keep this going. And Larry, again, from Insight Global, mentioned yesterday that long gone are the days where we are saying this candidate is only getting submitted to one role in the tech and finance fields. That used to always be the thing. We'd be making sure that we're good partners to our clients and say, you exclusively have access to this candidate. We've submitted them nowhere else. But really, again, with a national talent search, the opportunity is give this candidate access to all the jobs that they'd be the right fit for, and let them kind of self-service their way through what jobs they want to apply for. So within that same experience, giving them access to, consistently see the jobs that they might be a good fit for, and all the way throughout the process until they get to, an actual hiring stage, in which case obviously you likely wouldn't want to keep recommending them new jobs as they're on assignment. But all of that can be done during the new application process. And then as you move into the hiring process, we're seeing, again, this continue to be a great spot for automating the touch points that aren't the huge value adds of personal touch. So just a reminder that you have an interview coming up. Again, that information probably lives in your applicant tracking system today, and you can make an automation be able to look at that date and reach out to them via text, via email, via this mobile portal, whatever makes the most sense for that candidate. And these pieces, again, we look at onboarding is probably the number one spot where our candidate data tells us that while they appreciate the human touch of a recruiter and the ability to give industry specific guidance as a recruiter, the understanding of their onboarding documents and walking through that process isn't necessarily where they want, somebody over their shoulder. So being able to say, here is, your certainly your I-9s and all of these pieces as they're going into the actual new hire onboarding process, but maybe even earlier in the process, asking for the resume or asking for additional certifications. All those pieces can be, kind of put into this one experience so that they can self-service that information whenever they need to. So certainly if we look at the healthcare area where we have, credentials and licenses that are needed for pretty much every position, or in our more regulated industries like, government, et cetera, those pieces, all of this can be collected via, one interface, one experience from the candidate's point of view, and be flowing back into the applicant tracking system and notifying the recruiter of the completion of all these pieces. And I think one of the, again, most interesting pieces too, as we think about that process that we have today of where does the candidate go to fill out each one of these documents. Today, we send them through, here's your, login to look at jobs. Here's your login to look at onboarding and fill out your onboarding documents. Now for this client, we actually have to use this background check provider. So you'll have this login for this background check provider. And then if they need to go back and do anything in any of those systems, they need to remember which login it was, and kind of very friction heavy end-to-end process. And so that's what, when we look at initiating background checks within the same platform, clicking into this and immediately being directed to your background check and your background check provider that's specific to that client that you're onboarding them for, and having, again, one login across all these platforms, one experience, really elevates you as a brand to the candidate. And now you've got them hired, you've got them through that entire process, and you've give a lot of stuff that you still want to keep in communication with them on. And certainly, there's going to be the human check-ins too of how was the first day, give me any information that you need for us to help you with the, day number 2 or the rest of the assignment. But a lot of these other pieces can be, automations that reach out to the candidate, or automations that present something to the candidate in this mobile portal that they can interact with. So things like in certain industries, setting your work preferences, maybe it's a shift that you are most interested in, or selecting a shift for future shifts, et cetera. Assignment start reminders. So certainly in this candidate-driven, candidate-short market, we see, an increase in ghosting of that first day. You'd be amazed at how much success clients of ours see from just having an automated reminder that lets the candidate know that today's your first day, here's the information you need to know about the job, et cetera. And that can be done via an automation to, an email or text. But certainly, if we're keeping them all within this one experience, they might look at something like the screenshot on the right here, getting the map directly to the facility, et cetera. All those pieces available in a mobile fashion, since that's what their preference is to digest. And then that first day arrival check-in is interesting because it doesn't have to just be, hey, how was the first day? But we're starting to see a lot of use of, that NPS score for how was the first day? How was your experience with us as a staffing firm up to this point? Or how is your experience with the client that we've put you on site with? And all those different scores can be kind of factored back into your applicant tracking system. And again, if we start to think about transparency and that being a desire that the candidate has, especially with working with those Fiverr and Upwork systems, this data can start to really give a picture for what candidates think about working for a certain client of yours, or what clients think about certain candidates. And you can start to use these scorings and how you rank the candidates in your searches as well, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But then certainly as we get to, they are an active consultant, they're working for us on site with the client or remotely with the client, I guess is more likely. We can do these automated check-ins as well. Certainly how was the first day, but how has the first 3 weeks of your assignment been? Was there anything that we didn't prepare you for that we should prepare the next person for? How likely are you to go back and work for this employer again if another contract arises, et cetera? But then these other pieces that we think about, again, how many different systems do we send a candidate to capture their time, capture their expenses? Are they going to the VMS? Are they using our own proprietary time capture tool? That's another login somewhere where they're punching on a clock. If we can bring all of this and streamline it through this one interface, this one experience, and they don't have to remember a bunch of different passwords to accomplish just punching in and out every day, huge boost again in that candidate experience. And then one of the things we're seeing as we partner with some of these, especially as we partner with some of these daily pay providers today, is being able to review your pay and maybe getting cashed out on your pay at the end of a shift. So certainly we see the precedent for this with like a SNAP nurse within healthcare. There are, also plenty of light industrial firms and hospitality firms that are starting to experience, daily pay providers where you finish your shift for that day and can cash out your paycheck just like you could if you were an Uber driver at the end of your shift. And that experience going through one application is probably one of the most sticky experiences you can have to be the first firm they're thinking about when it's time for them to redeploy to another place. And so then again, my favorite part, and I say that somewhat unenthusiastically sometimes because it is such an opportunity for us for redeployment, is that end of assignment. As we're nearing the end of that assignment, how do we get the candidate engaged with us again? Certainly if we've lost any engagement, but how do we give them job recommendations for what their next assignment is, so that they're thinking about us for their next assignment instead of the next staffing firm. Now that we're all working on a very similar playbook of jobs, we know that we have every ability to redeploy them on the national pool of jobs that we have, but also so does many of our competitors who have the same types of positions and who probably have this candidate sitting in their database as well and are actively reaching out to figure out what their next status is. And we also can certainly get, these NPS scores, but I think the big thing, we've talked about NPS scores, the big thing is how do we action those automatically as well? So how do we turn a great NPS score into a request for a referral? So thanks for the 9 or 10. I'm glad that you, enjoyed working with us as a staffing firm or enjoyed working with this client. Is there anybody else that you would feel good about introducing us to for their next opportunity? Certainly 7 or 8, you could do something like solicit feedback, ask them for more information of what was not perfect about the assignment or what was not great about working with us as a firm. And certainly anything less than a 7, we can alert people. We can alert the recruiter. We can alert the management of the staffing firm. All of these pieces should be kind of baked into one automated process so that we're not just grabbing information from the talent that we work with, but we're also getting real action capabilities out of the back end of that. And then if we look at the, again, now they're alumni, maybe we weren't able to place them towards the end of this, very similar to that initial talent nurturing process, right? We're ongoing, we're going to try to engage with them, we're going to try to connect with them, put jobs in front of them so that we're the first firm they're thinking about, because we all know that the cost of candidate acquisition is high. Think about how much we had to work to get them onto that first assignment. The hope is that we can kind of double down on that reputation and that relationship that we have with them and continue to be where they're coming back to for jobs. So that was the recruiter's view of this whole process. Again, lots of things happening in that view, lots of moving parts. But if we think about the process today, those moving parts happen in a lot of different systems, and they're kind of on our demand as a staffing firm as to what system they go into versus the recruiter, or excuse me, versus the candidates. So now we've given the candidate the choice: interact with us when you want, how you want, as on demand as you want. But what does the staffing firm's view of that process look like? Well, that's the great thing, is that now we've freed up so much time because we've automated so many of the lower end touch points, or less pertinent, less value added touch points, that the recruiter can really focus on, again, building that relationship. So if we start just with the job being received, so go back to the initial premise here of VMS jobs. They're coming in like crazy. We've got more VMS jobs than we've ever had before. As these jobs come in, do we still work them like we work a traditional retail position? Do we still see recruiters, or account managers getting this job and shooting a text to a group of a couple of recruiters, or waiting for allocations at the end of the day, or maybe sending an email blast to their whole office, but it's to their office? Or is there some better way for us to make sure that we immediately, as soon as we get a job, look at the entire database and start working a process around a global talent pool or a national talent pool instead of a local one? And that's the first piece that we see in some of these examples here, is that job comes out, you get the notification, yes, from the VMS that the job exists, but what if at the same time you're getting a notification from your applicant tracking system, and it's saying, we see that this job just appeared, we've actually already matched these 5 candidates, these 10 candidates, and we've automatically reached out to them to gauge their level of interest in this position. And so you walk in, into the office in the morning, which is 5 steps away, because you go from your kitchen to your office now instead of across town like we used to. But you sit down at your desk, you open up the computer. You've probably already seen some of these come across in your phone, but now you're opening your computer and you're saying, I have 4 jobs that came in since this morning, and I've already got candidates that have been reached out to for all these positions. And we take that action a step further by saying, it's not just that we've reached out to them, but we've been active in how we've reached out to them. So the next phase of this, and especially if we look at VMS positions or national positions, strategic positions, we all know what the knockout questions are for this. We know what the VMS asks us. We know what this specific client, because we've had hundreds of roles for them, probably hundreds of roles with similar titles from similar hiring managers. We know what the questions are and what they're looking for. Yes, we can ask them over the phone, but that back and forth, that, hey, I forgot to ask you this one question that the account manager wanted me to ask you. Let me give you another call and make sure that this one piece is correct. If we just put that all into one streamlined process and made it on demand for the candidate, I think there'd be a real uplift in their willingness to give us that information. So here, that we just reached out to this candidate, that we saw the email of the 5 candidates we reached out to, and as they select yes, that they're interested in hearing more about this position. So the email, again, generically gives them we've got a client, they're offering remote work for this type of position. Maybe you even put the pay rate in there, because we've done some auto calculations off the bill rate. We've seen some cool stuff down there too. But they've selected that they're interested, they want to understand more, and we invite them into these just really straightforward, really quick knockout questions. Comes to them on their phone in a text message. They click the link, they open it up, and they get asked a few knockout questions that they would be asked normally over the phone. Are you eligible to work in the US? Yes. Have you worked for this company before? No. Are you familiar with AngularJS? Have you worked with it in a different position? Yes. What about this skill set here? Yes. Have you had some experience developing mobile applications? Absolutely. Cool. Well, then when would you be available to start? And these questions are all questions that came directly out of the VMS system, because this specific client asks this question for every type of this type of role every time. And so now we've filled all those knockout questions out as a candidate. And as we close out of that, we're dropped right back on the staffing firm's website. So your website to see other open positions, to maybe go select to build your profile with us, etc. But the great thing is we've answered all those questions. All of that has immediately come back and is in our applicant tracking system. So we're not duplicating the effort of reaching out, missing some of this information, missing some of it in the note, etc. That's all come back to us. And we've now also tracked that once they landed on our website, what did they do from there? How did they interact with us as a brand once they were on our website? Did they look at other jobs? Did they interact with this blog? All of those pieces, once they've kind of entered the website through an automation, can be tracked and formed again into automations that you can have with the candidate. And so again, we look at the recruiting process of this. That candidate has filled out that 5-question survey that took them 35 seconds to read all the questions and answer them. And now we've got real actionable insights in our applicant tracking system. We know when we look at the job that these are the candidates that were automatically reached out to, but these were the candidates that have already engaged and have already given us answers on these questions and that qualify based on the knockout questions. We also have this engagement score that's really interesting, certainly from a, let's say you ask for 100 matches and we reach out to 100 matches and you get 40 of them back as interested and qualified. The engagement score gives us some understanding of how likely are they to pick up the phone if you call them, because that tells us how much have they interacted with us as a brand through all of our different content that we've nurtured them with. But then certainly the role of the recruiter searching for jobs isn't going away. That's still a huge, valuable asset. We all have the recruiters certainly in our office that every time a new hire gets trained, you're going to send them to that person because they're going to teach them how to write Boolean, and they're going to teach them how to do it in Monster, how to do it in Career Builder, how to do it in Bullhorn. How do you search for this exact candidate with every keyword and every action capability within a Boolean search that you want? That doesn't go anywhere because you're still not going to just have all of these handed to you on a silver platter, as much as we'd love to say that technology solves it all. So now you're looking in your database, you find this search with your perfect Boolean match. You're looking at a list of candidates that you know would be good for the job, but you don't know from looking at it if any of them are likely to pick up the phone. You're probably searching through notes, seeing when the last time was that they worked with you. Any type of engagement that you can figure out to see, hey, how do I enter myself into this conversation? But what if you could just click a drop down in your list view and say, of the candidates that are a good fit, who's been the most engaged with us as a brand over the last 90 days? And that engagement score that you see on the screen here tells you just that. So it tells you essentially who's most likely to engage with you because they have engaged with you most going into the past. So they have a recollection of who you are as a brand. They have an understanding of maybe a recruiter that they've worked with. All those pieces are, prime signals for you to reach out to them because they're going to be most likely to interact back with you for a role. So again, doesn't go away that we have to search the database for jobs, or that we have to pull candidates certainly from LinkedIn and Monster and Indeed. But the hope is that your candidates within your database that you've been actively nurturing now have some ability to be scored on how much they've interacted with you as well. And then that contractor care piece as well. So if we go back into thinking about this as you're the recruiter, we have candidates that are on site. You want to remind them certainly on all those first day check-ins that we talked about, have the candidate give you some additional information. One that's been particularly relevant now is that COVID-related health feedback check. So being able to, again, run a survey on, if they've been in contact with somebody in the last 14 days, if they are actually going on site. But all of those pieces are automated, And the important part about it, and why we still want to talk about it in the recruiter experience, is that while the recruiter doesn't have to do anything to get all of these pieces out to the candidate, they're getting the feedback from all of that back into the candidate's record. So as they're interacting with us about the first day check-in, if they give us a crazy bad score or tell us that they didn't find the site or anything like that, it can immediately escalate to the recruiter and an action can be made for them to reach out to the candidate. So we're getting all the insights from this, but we also aren't getting all of the noise and all of the manual constraints of having to actually make the phone call, write the email, probably the same email that we've written 100 times as we've had starts over the years to these candidates. Instead, we're just getting the how do I help you with whatever comes out of that. And then certainly the redeployment piece. So again, we talked about wanting to reach out to the candidate, let them know that we have other opportunities, but think about the data integrity piece of this too. How many times as we move candidates through this process do we not change their availability from available to on assignment or available to placed? Automation should do all of that for you. As we're going through this process, we should automatically change all of those to make sure that your candidate database is up to date and in sync at where the candidate's at in the life cycle. But the same thing, as the contract's coming to an end, we should switch that availability from on assignment to open to roles, or whatever your equivalent for that is within your firm, because you want to be able to give account managers or anybody else who's searching your database the understanding that because their contract's coming to an end, they should now be considered in all of these searches that everybody else is running. And you want to reach out to the sales contacts to gather this information proactively. And I love this one because how many times have we sat in a room or now virtually on a call with our recruiting and account management teams, and a recruiter has asked the account manager, such and such as assignment's coming to an end. Do we know if they're getting extended? And sales, crap, I need to call that person real quick. I will let you know as soon as I get some information from them. What if after they've reached a certain level of that assignment, we automatically sent an email, a text to the hiring manager to ask if this person was going to be extended, or to set up a Calendly invite to chat with their account manager? All of that happening automatically so that we don't have to wait for the end report to come out every week, every month, and review that as a group. We're all proactively taking action on these stages. And certainly as we proactively are taking action on this, as soon as the hiring manager responds that no, actually they're not getting extended, they will end their assignment at the 6-month mark, at the year mark, let's say, we're going to immediately put this candidate into that re-engagement campaign, giving them active or jobs that are tailored specifically to their experience, so that they can, again, self-select. They click on this job, it notifies the recruiter that owns their account that this candidate's been engaged and interested in this position, and kicks off this whole cycle again of how do we get them redeployed. So we should start to see, as we have this national talent pool and this national job pool, redeployment rates start to really increase as we get more proficient in the process of working with these candidates. Then I think, again, we touched on this a little bit, but the hygiene throughout the entire process. So keeping those statuses up to date as they move from one status to another. Obviously, certainly keeping the job status up to date is something that we're doing already, but how do we keep the candidate status up to date? And then gathering that feedback of the on-site, how was this hiring manager, or how was this company to work for? How are we as a company to work for? All those pieces should be fed back into your applicant tracking system. And getting feedback means that we should escalate anything that is, again, outside of our acceptable parameters. So how do we immediately take action when there's a problem that's brought to our attention? And so that's the experience from both sides. Knowing that we have 5 minutes, I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of the fun part, which is the blockers here. Because that is often the question that we get. Is it sounds like, as a staffing firm, we know the data, we see the data ourselves. Hopefully we have the data from every job that we get from every VMS in our system already, because we're already automating it. That's why we're talking about the VMS Process Remastered, because hopefully at this point, with everyone looking at digital transformation, including our buyers, our clients, as a firm, hopefully we're looking at digital transformation as table stakes, right? So we know we have every job in the system, and we know that we need the candidate's data to be accurate. But then what would be the blockers for us to be able to, deploy a process like this? Well, unfortunately, the one first piece that we run into, especially when we look at the AI matching that the Bullhorn product does specifically, but really any AI matching that you might utilize, is the ATS data quality. Your matches are only as good as the data quality. If you don't have things like categories or skills accurately filled out for the majority of your database, if you don't have them in the right geographic location or have the right previous job titles in those fields, we can only, or any AI service can only match as well as the data that you have cleansed in your system. And so that's why we always say the first step to this, really, and it's one all-inclusive step, but the first step in this process is how do you cleanse that data? Again, we would suggest in a semi-automated fashion as much as possible, and in a self-service fashion. So cool, we have candidates that don't have the required skills checked on their profile, but we actually see that they've been decently engaged with our content. Why don't we put every candidate who's been engaged, who doesn't have this piece of data, into a campaign where we automatically reach out to them via text and we ask them to check their most relevant skills. And when they select those skills, they immediately come back into the applicant tracking system. And now, without a recruiter having to do anything, we have a much more cleansed data set on our applicant pool. So as we bring up that data quality, we're going to start to see better opportunities for us as an industry to leverage AI and automation, which will lead us to even more prosperous ability to just focus on the relationship piece. New tech, old process. This is a fun conversation that we have, especially with our larger national brands, is that, again, we look at VMS, and we've talked about for a while that this needs to be have at least a portion of it that's centralized. We've heard obviously it called retail business, your brick and mortar business versus your VMS and strategic business. But we still have requisitions that flow into an account manager's inbox who's in your Boston, Massachusetts office, and they put it in the ATS when they get a chance to, because they're out on site, they're busy making other introductions, making other relationships, and then by the time it gets into the system, it's maybe only tagged to a certain group of recruiters or to a certain office, and the visibility there is suffers, obviously. So you miss the opportunity for the cross subs in a national process. So now we're starting to see, and Larry mentioned this yesterday, Insight Global's process around this as well, is that you really have a national head of most of these strategic relationships. So somebody who's thinking about my relationship with this farm tech company, holistically across the nation, and they have contacts with the account managers and recruiters across all offices, because some positions will come out that will be market specific because they'll be required to be on site, and that market probably has the majority of candidates for it. But other positions, as they come out, want to be advertised to the entirety of your recruiting network. So all of your recruiters across all of your offices, and certainly the auto match helps with that, because imagine being a recruiter and you come in and you're getting a message that says, I have a perfect, or you have a job that's perfect for this candidate. I mean, that's an optimal way to get your commission check, is to just be told that this candidate just needs to be reached out to and you're good to go. And then, certainly communicating the benefit to recruiting and sales. I'd say that's the last big piece of this pie, is letting recruiting, letting sales understand that this process and this automation growth that we're going through is only going to benefit them, because it takes away the minutia of their job, and they only have to think about how great that relationship can be with the candidate, how great that relationship can be with the client. So in a truly automated fashion, right at 10:30, we are through the entirety of that. I know there's a ton of questions, a lot of great feedback. Hopefully the team at Bullhorn here that's joined has been able to answer some of those, but I will certainly speak with Jan to get those questions off the platform. I want to thank Jan and team for allowing us to come and speak with everyone. And certainly, if any of you guys have any questions or want to do any follow-up, you can find me on LinkedIn. Again, Mark Hummel at Bullhorn. We appreciate you guys joining. Have a great rest of the conference.